a rich and strong story, and it can be quite, well, I find it very inspiring, and I'm very, very grateful that you've come down to Peckham. I was fortunate to be at St James's Church, a wonderful church in Piccadilly in October, which was a terribly important anniversary. I'm not going to tell you what of, because I think that's where Joe's story will begin. So, this edition of Peckham Podcast is very special. For one thing, we've got a live audience, and thank you so much for coming. You represent many walks of life, and three generations at least, depending on how you count a generation these days. One of the things that we've always done in Peckham Podcast is have a theme floating around underneath the conversation of what I have called community and faith. But faith I spell with a small f or a capital F. Because I think even if you don't attend a church or follow a major religion, I think the idea of having faith in yourself or having faith in people is legitimate and very real for us. Perhaps when we start out, we hope to have faith in our parents delivering good stuff for us to guide us along, etc. So community and faith has been huge, and that's in itself a bit of a subject that I may well ask Joe to dive into with me. Joe, you've had a remarkable journey, and it took a change in direction of a rather seismic nature at a particular point in your life. I don't want to say anything really, so would you like to start by telling us the story of October 1984?
Yes, well, thank you for having me here. It's lovely to have a live audience. So yes, October the 12th, 1984, I was in my mid-20s, and I woke up there on the Friday to hear that a bomb had exploded in a hotel in Brighton, and I knew that my dad was staying at the hotel. He was a Conservative MP, and it was the annual conference, and I remember we had to wait for about 8 hours before they got news. We got news that they found my dad's body. He was one of 5 people killed in the hotel. And my stepmother, who was with him, was badly injured. And the IRA said they were responsible. Now, for me, I didn't grow up thinking the IRA were a threat. I lived in peacetime. That's how I saw my life. But the moment that I realised that my dad had been killed, I no longer lived in peacetime, because now I'm part of a violent war, I'm part of a violent conflict.
Now, for the younger people here and viewers, IRA meant?
They came from Northern Ireland.
They were literally the Irish
Republican Army. Yes. Yeah. And there were many bombs in London, like growing up. Sometimes I couldn't get to school, like there were bomb scares, but I never thought that the IRA would affect my life. And the moment that it did, I couldn't go back to the person I had been, because I'd been someone who had a dream of the world. For me, it was there to contribute, to enjoy, to live, to thrive. But now I'm part of a war, and so I couldn't. And 2 days later, I went to St James's Church where we met, and I sat very quietly in a pew, and I said to myself, I'm not going to go for revenge. I'm not going to go for having an enemy. I'm going to find a way to bring something positive out of this. And I want to understand those who killed my father. I don't want an enemy, because at that time I saw everyone in the world as like a global family. I didn't believe in enemies. But I had an enemy because someone had killed my father. So this journey started of understanding just 2 days later, which is like really early on. But I think it's because that way I knew I could survive. That would give me a sense of direction.
Now, you wanted to understand, but is that on a political level or on a cosmic level?
No, it was about rehumanising them. So the IRA at that time were the most dehumanised terrorists we had. Obviously that's changed since then. And the way the Daily Mail spoke about them, I was never going to hear their story. I wanted to hear the personal story. I wasn't actually that interested in politics. I was more interested in what led someone living in Belfast in the streets aged 18 decide to join the IRA. I refused to believe that they were just like these evil monsters. And so in order to find that out, I had to, actually travel to Belfast to meet people in 85 and 86. And I knew I wasn't going to get my answer from the newspapers or the media.
And you are of Northern Irish stock, aren't you?
Republic.
So you have your own deep kind of blood tie to Ireland.
Yeah.
The Republican, the IRA were wanting independence from Britain and Westminster in particular. Yeah. How did you sit in amongst that prior to the Brighton bomb?
Yeah, I would say before the bomb went off, I was someone who saw myself as spiritual, who didn't really engage politically at all. But I do remember the hunger strikers, which happened in 81, 82, I think it was.
81, yeah.
And I thought it was appalling the way they were being treated, and they were left to die, and they were asking for their political rights. So I felt very angry about that. But I was actually interested in non-violence, and in 1980 I wrote a whole essay about Gandhi's ideas of non-violence. I lived with the Tibetan people in the Himalayas and studied meditation. So I was a bit sort of not quite in the world at that time, in my sort of early 20s.
And you were in the Himalayas for a couple of years, I think.
Yes, I was living in a hut without any electric, without any water, very different from the childhood, which was very privileged, where I'd grown up. But to me it was really important to have that experience.
Yeah, your father was an MP in the home counties, or on the edge of London, wasn't he?
In Southgate.
Southgate, which is just North London, yeah.
Yes.
And so that was the world that you knew as a girl?
Yeah.
Right. And then by your early 20s, you were in the mountains?
Yeah, well, I think as a teenager, I rebelled a little bit, maybe a lot, and I was just interested in things that weren't taught at school. So I had a lot of fun in my teenage life exploring different worlds and just finding out, reading books, and really curious about, who is it that's not in the room when we speak to people. That was really important to me. As a daughter of a Tory MP, I was very interested in those who didn't vote Tory and those that I guess didn't feel they had a voice. That was really important to me as a teenager. And so I asked lots of questions, and that sort of led me to the Himalayas.
Right.
But that all ended. I think the me after the bomb just thought that's a complete waste of time because in the real world people are killed. And it's a luxury to go and live in a hut. This is what happens. And my motivation was, how can we create a world so that people don't go through what I've been through? And of course I know that they did, and they have, and they will. But at the time it was like, violence does not work. The pain, I had the responsibility of telling my little sister, who was 14, that her dad was killed and her mum was injured with no support, nothing. And her cry sort of stayed with me. And then I could tell that every child would have the same tears, every child would have the same pain, every parent have the same pain, doesn't matter what side you're on. So I refused to take sides. I refused to believe that some people's deaths mattered more than other people's. That was there right at the beginning.
Right. I mean, that's a wall to get through. I don't know how you achieved it in 2 days, because that would seem like a major journey to me.
But it was my focus. I don't mean that I never had times of rage or anger, but that was like my direction.
Yeah.
And it was an emotional journey, an emotional journey. I was not equipped. I didn't know how to deal with the kind of emotions I had, the trauma. And back in the 80s, there was no understanding of trauma and what people need at all. And things have changed a little bit, not a lot.
Now, there's a really major ingredient in this conversation, which is that when I went to see Jo in public in the church that is special for you in your life, it's a church that you directed yourself to out of all churches, there was a very important person sharing the stage with Jo. Tell us about that person.
So here was the man who killed my father. And I invited him to come on, it was the 40th anniversary of the Brighton bomb, to really show what is possible and to show that he did have his humanity. He did have his heart. He wasn't just this evil terrorist that he was called. He was a human being. I first met him in 2000. So we had the peace process in 97, I think it was. And as part of the peace process, they released the political prisoners early, because I think Patrick Magee would still be in prison now, or just coming out. But they released him early. And I do remember, we weren't prepared, turning on the TV, and there was Patrick Magee. Now, he almost killed the whole British government. So he had the whole world's press there, waiting for him to come out of prison. And I remember scrutinising his face, going, what's he thinking? What's he feeling? Does he have remorse? But he just got whisked away into a car and off he went. And first of all, I was thinking, well, this isn't fair. This isn't justice. My dad can't come back. But then I thought, well, this is for peace. This means less people are going to be killed. So I welcomed this. And then the idea came to me, I really want to meet him. And it took me a year and a half. And in that year and a half, I travelled a lot to Northern Ireland and met many people. I met other men who'd been in the IRA, which was really important preparation. I met people being affected by violence. I sort of immersed myself in this sort of post-conflict kind of healing and transformation time.
Did it take a year and a half because you wanted all that preparation, or because it was slow to find him?
Oh no, I found him very quickly, because people kept on telling me that he didn't want to meet me. Mm-hmm. And I even had a mediator spend like an hour kind of cross-examining me, asking me, and I think he decided that it shouldn't happen, I wasn't ready. So a lot of, I think, like gatekeepers decided it shouldn't happen, and so stopped it. Mm. And so 3 times I heard, he doesn't want to meet you. But I carried on, because I'm like, well, you never know, I'm going to trust this, and if I don't meet him, then I called it building bridges. There's other bridges I can build. Like, there are other people I can meet. I was meeting families of hunger strikers. I was meeting other men in the IRA. It was fine. Lots to do. Lots of bridge building to do. And then the 4th time someone said, I can arrange the meeting. I said, please do. And then that was the one. And one of the first things I said to Pat was, I appreciate you changing your mind and agreeing to meet me. And he went, no, I've always said I'd meet you. So sort of, that's kind of like an icebreaker, because we're kind of then talking about the same thing, which isn't linked to the bomb. But I didn't meet him to change him. I didn't meet him to get him to say he was sorry. I didn't meet him to tell him that he was a bad man. I actually met him to look into his eyes and see his humanity, because that was going to give me something back that the bomb took from me. That was going to restore some of my humanity. And so my feeling was, I'd go meet him once and then never meet him again, and no one would ever know. So I didn't tell anyone I was going to meet him. I now do quite complex restorative justice after homicide, bring people together. This breaks every rule, because there's no one there for the preparation. There's no one there holding my hand. So I'm literally on a ferry, on a boat from Holyhead to Dublin, terrified.
Were you?
Yeah, absolutely terrified. It was like, all these years of not wanting to blame him, what would it be like being in the same room? Was it betraying my father? Lots and lots of concerns. Mm. And then when I get in the house, it's not a prepared environment at all. It's an activist house in Dublin. But there's something about the fact for me that it was a little bit chaotic that kind of helped. And I remember Patrick walking in the room, and I shook his hand, and I had some thoughts like, you don't look like a terrorist, odd thoughts. And then another voice in my head going, leave now, Joe, leave now. This is wrong. You shouldn't be beating the man who killed your father. Just leave. But more than that, I was just present to him. I wanted to make it safe for him to open up and share. And so I listened to him incredibly and intensely. I had to. There was no other way. And I asked him questions, and I shared a poem I'd written for him called Bridges Can Be Built. And he started off giving me the sort of language of, we had to do it. We were oppressed. Your dad had the power, and he used the word we, not, he wasn't vulnerable. And I knew he'd do that, because for him, the bomb was a strategy, and it worked, because eventually they got political rights, which is what he wanted. So for him, it worked. And for him, he was explaining that, bombs in England were much more effective than bombs in Northern Ireland. And he felt, when he was in prison, he got a PhD. He's extremely clever and intellectual. And for him, choosing to join the IRA was something that he thought about deeply. So I'm listening to him talking about basically justifying killing my father, but I do remember a moment when I looked into his eyes and I could see like this emotion about how much he cared for his community, and I got a sense of the suffering he experienced in Belfast. And then in that moment, he's no longer this faceless enemy. He's a human being with a story. But he is justifying killing my father, and that's difficult. So I was about to say to him, let's end this, thank you. And that's when he changed. And he looked at me and he said, I don't know anymore who I am. Can I hear your anger and your rage? And what can I do for you? I've never met anyone as open as you. And that was a moment it was huge and it was scary, because he'd taken off this political hat and he'd become vulnerable and open, and he no longer talked about we, he started saying I, and he wanted to know about my dad. He wanted to know the kind of man he'd been. And he would later say that was a moment of being disarmed by my empathy. And if I'd gone in there going, I'm right, you're wrong, talking about politics, he would have stayed in a very safe place of justification. And so I stayed for the second half of the meeting because I knew this was new, this was different. You know. And he left that meeting now knowing that he killed a wonderful human being with a soul. And he arrived at that meeting just thinking that legitimate target. So that's a big change.
Yeah, because he on his side had othered the Westminster politician.
Yes.
He didn't see a person.
No.
But you sought that person out, didn't you, on your side?
Yeah.
And that proved to be so disarming.
Yeah.
Which is an amazing life lesson.
Yeah. Because the time my self-esteem was quite low. I wasn't in a very good space with my marriage. Things were very, very difficult. I didn't have much belief in myself, and yet it was the empathy that disarmed him. This man who's like one of the most has been sort of professional, successful IRA bombers, and there he was. It was empathy, and I kind of remind myself sometimes in my life when I'm finding things hard, which I still do, that empathy is actually an incredible way of transformation.
Yeah, and so I get the feeling that you drew heavily, I don't know whether it was conscious, on all the spiritual work that you had undertaken.
Maybe in terms of direction, but not the how. It didn't give me the how. How to give up blame, like how to feel anger and pain and not to blame someone. I learned that myself. How to listen to someone who is sitting there saying that, it's a good job I killed your father. How to listen without making him wrong. Things like that I learned through experience. And I did actually, as a parent, start learning about conflict transformation. Once I had my second daughter, I actually did a course and I trained in it, special way of how to listen. But it wasn't about practicing skills, because it was intense real life. But I think I drew on the strength maybe from the time when I was being spiritual, but then some of the skills that I'd learnt. And I was completely out of my depth as well. It wasn't easy.
No, I remember seeing a line that said reconciliation isn't easy. And I think that was yours.
Was it?
Yeah.
I might have said that.
But it fits. It's obvious. You can want something, but getting from A to B is... Are you at B? Have you made that transition now from wanting a thing and now feeling that you're with it?
I know that I now see Patrick McGee as a friend, and I care about him, and I sometimes get very frustrated again, and he's changed his language recently, so he doesn't always say some of the things he said in the early days, because it's 24 years now of engagement. I can sometimes feel frustrated, but beyond that, I am grateful that he has engaged with me for all these years. Really grateful.
You said he's changed his language. Can you give us an example?
Well, I think in the early years he would talk about using violence as a cost to his humanity, which he didn't know about. And I really see that, and I do a lot of work in schools, as you know, and I talk about crossing a line that people don't talk about what happens to our humanity when we cross a line, and the journey, I think the journey back for him is actually harder than the journey I'm on. I really do believe that. It's a really hard journey. I wouldn't want it on anyone. So where am I now? I have a lot more, I would say, emotional intelligence that equips me with, a whole lot of experiences in life. But I've learned quite a lot of them the hard way. I didn't have them in my 20s at all. But now in my 60s, I'm like, yeah, kind of doing okay.
It takes time to work through this sort of growth, doesn't it?
Yes.
It's a serious development. It's like growing a tree.
Yeah.
An acorn becomes an oak, but you have to wait.
Yeah.
And you have to keep pushing to grow the acorn.
But also I think to change our blame response is one of the hardest things to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sitting here saying I'm always nice. I'm always pleasant. I have 3 adult daughters, and they've certainly received my sometimes wanting to blame them, make them wrong, and get into controlling, and then they challenge me back, and it's wonderful. But so I'm still changing that need to blame. When I'm hurt, I still got that voice in my head going, whose fault is it? I might make it my fault, I might make it someone else's fault. So I think changing that need to blame is really difficult. And it's it's easy to see that the people who are like the bad, wrong people are those that the terrorists, whoever we want to other. But actually, when I start not seeing the humanity in someone, that's the beginning of the spectrum. That's the beginning of dehumanization. I'm quite capable of getting self-righteous about things. Really self-righteous. Don't want to listen to them, because I'm right and they're just wrong. Like, I still get into that kind of thinking, but I don't believe that brings us what ideally we're looking for, which is some kind of sustainable peace in the world. Every time we other, we're kind of taking it further away. It doesn't mean we don't challenge people, but without blaming, shaming.
Yeah, that's the trick, isn't it? It's a very important differential to find.
It's really difficult as well.
Yeah, to challenge but not demean.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it to do with dissociating the behaviour from the person within?
Yeah, we are more than our behaviour. Like, Patrick's not just... So I don't label him. I don't call him a terrorist unless I'm talking about the story. But I'll describe what he planted the bomb, which killed my father and others, right? But he's more than that. He's not just... Though he is known as the Brighton bomber, but he's a father. He's a friend. He's a partner. There's more to him. And none of us are defined by our behaviour. We're all more than that. And it's very easy to think that because we've done things, and let's say we've all hurt people. I mean, I've hurt people, and then to decide, well, that must mean, I'm a bad person. But no, as human beings, we're all flawed. But we are more than our behaviour.
We are. I'm very pleased that we've got some young people with us today, because, the kind of journey that you're rather a long way down the road of, 4 decades. If you guys, I'm looking deliberately at our teenage friends, 4 decades from here is sort of unimaginable, isn't it? And the work is still going on, but it's huge work. Inner cities, knife crime is a thing.
Yeah.
People carry guns. Occasionally people drive cars at other people, and there's a lot of madness around. And perhaps, I don't know whether it's increasing or whether it's just the coverage of those sorts of things that makes us sense it's perhaps on the increase. Anyway, it's there, and it reminds us often. The news, they tell us that sort of thing. So, God willing, it wouldn't come to your door, but these difficult life events, they come uninvited, don't they? And so, finding a way into the complex, labyrinthine set of emotions and duties. Doing it, I'm not sure you can do it without faith, but although I'm not practicing anything myself, but I've spent a lot of my adult life thinking about it and exploring it and reading various spiritual treatises and so on. So I have a developed take on it all, but I don't go to church. Do you go to church as a matter of interest?
No.
No. And do you count yourself as a spiritual person?
I don't know anymore.
Oh, right.
I think I'm just a human being.
Right.
You know, and like the older I get, the less I know. So I like to feel I'm connected to the global family, which is what I felt as a teenager, so I'll come back to that. And the one thing I do know is that we all have our humanity, which connects us. And that's deeper than anything else. You know, and I believe in the power of love. You know, a love that will see your humanity despite anything, and will believe in you. And I do believe in humanity. And to me, having hope that we can create a more loving world full of equity and the safety is something that I work at. You know, I think as human beings, just as we have the power to destroy each other and to hurt, we also have the power to transform. And I have examples of so many people. I'm very blessed. I have faith in people, and I trust that I will carry on growing and learning. I'm never going to stop. But in terms of who's in charge of all this, I haven't got a clue, you know. And but it also means I can sit with everyone and listen and believe it. I'm not attached to any way of thinking at all. I think we all bring our own meaning, and that's important. We bring our own meaning, and there isn't like one right way of thinking about religion or spirituality. I think I was far more certain in my 20s, but now I'm like, no.
One is. Now, I think it's about time for intervention from the floor. Do we have an initial taker who would like to make a contribution? Yeah, I thought that would happen.
To do that, you'll need to be online.
To do that, you'll need to be online. No, you can make an intervention from the room. Wally.
Yeah, I'm Wally MacDonald. I live in Brixton, but I am from the Republic of Ireland. I grew up in Dublin. And when the Brighton bombing happened, you know, I have to admit I was indifferent to it. But when I met and heard Joe's story, which I've heard before, it also humanised me about it and thinking about the effects of it, people's lives and your life as you described. It just kind of brought home, you know, just the negativity of what seems like a good cause, but because it's violence, how damaging that is. And we've had so much violence in Northern Ireland. I mean, I grew up, and we all grew up, supporting the IRA in the south because of the injustice we felt about how things were happening in the north of Ireland and about our grievance about the border itself. But once the violence happened, we all said, no, this is not what we want to support. People being bombed in Carrickfake, in Oman, in various places, and the various killings that happened during the times of the Troubles, you know. But hearing your story, Joe, so personal and so intimate, also had a shift on me. So that's, I think, what you hope would happen when you do and tell your story with Pat. And it made me kind of peel back, you know, a certain conditioning in my mind about, because we grew up to dislike the results of the British Empire's effect on Ireland. We all grew up with that, with the education we got. But this story was so remarkable, so I'd never met anybody who'd been affected by it, bombing, you know, and by the thought of being killed. So I want to say, it really helped me change, shift in me, and have maybe more empathy about both sides. Because I didn't have that, you know. So I just wanted to kind of, I didn't really have a question, but I wanted to say that really.
I think growing up with a historical slant is fascinating as an indoctrination because there's so much of that. And as our society becomes more and more complex with more and more cultures attempting to live together in a plausible communitarian way, that question of othering, you know, I mean, it's almost inevitably going to happen, it seems. So the right-thinking younger people here, you've got a job on your hands, guys. No, you wanted to come in, I think, with a comment, is that right? would you mind giving us your name first?
My name's Samuel. I'm here from Elevate Minds. And the story is kind of interesting because it's something that happened in the past that you can apply to the present as well. Because seeing how you channeled your anger and resentment into something positive, and you didn't let it affect you, because sometimes my emotions might affect me in a negative way. But seeing you trying to understand the person, why he did it, and trying to like understand his human qualities, it made me realize that everyone deserves a second chance, and they shouldn't just like discard like their personal feelings or what they were doing or why they did it, because they might have had a reason. I don't know much about history because I didn't do it for GCSEs because I'm not that good at it. But yeah, I understand that people do deserve a second chance, and that you can always
Yeah, the gentleman, the bomber, was sentenced to 35 years, and he was released after 14 because there was a special political agreement arrived at.
Multiple life sentences he had.
Yeah, but the period he was, I gather, handed down was 35.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. And you're right about our anger. Like learning to harness anger without hurting other people is really, really difficult. And I think that when bad things happen to us, that anger, we want to give it to someone else and make them suffer, like it's a natural part of us. But like I'm thinking, when we do that, we're almost like hurt twice. Hurt because we've been hurt, and then hurt secondly because through putting our anger on someone else, whether we go for revenge, then that also hurts us as well. And it's important for me that I don't have someone in my head that is the reason why I'm in pain, because that means I'm giving my power away. I would have made him carry on being a negative force in my life, and he'd already killed my father, so I didn't want him in my head as a reason why my life was difficult. And revenge to me is about trying to change the past, and this is more about let's try and change the future. But you're right, the first step is to find ways to express our anger. And like anger's natural, it's understandable, it can be useful sometimes, but to express it without hurting people, I wouldn't say I'm yet completely skilled in that. But I do a lot of work with young people about anger, and it's important to talk about it and own it and feel it because it's yours. But then find a way to let it go, and that letting go is it's hard. It's like emotional work, and to me it doesn't matter whether you know the history or not, because it's a human story, and in all our communities there are people still being killed and people who are killing, and that to me is what it's about, is a universal story, even though it's put in the past of the Irish situation. So.
There is
Did you want to
incidentally.
come back at something? Did you want to respond again, or that's fine if you don't?
Yeah, I understand now where you're coming from.
Yeah.
And it just gave me a bit like clarification on why you did what you did.
Yeah.
And it might have been hard to go and meet the person that killed your father. It might have had personally, it might have been quite heavy to do such a task. But seeing you overcome doing something so difficult, it kind of encouraged me as well to face something that might be blocking me from achieving self-actualization or achieving a better side of myself. And yeah, you channeled your anger really well, and seeing you channel your emotions into something positive is something I can apply as well in my daily life, not just me but also the people around me as well.
Yeah.
So I just want to say thank you.
Wow. Well, you're absolutely inspirational with how you put that, and I just send all my support to you, and any way I can ever be there for you, I would love to. But thank you so much for taking it so deep. Thank you.
Samuel, can I ask you, where did you pick up the idea and phrase self-actualization?
Oh, I study psychology. So.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's just that's reaching the best person you can be.
You can be, yeah.
So it's just becoming your ideal self, and just achieving everything that you want to achieve. There's stages, and that's the pinnacle. So
And are we talking Maslow's
yeah
hierarchy?
Yeah. I did some revisions to this, so that's why I got.
Good man.
Yeah.
Starting young.
Brilliant.
I didn't find that hierarchy for years. Right, next, please. Yeah, Errol at the back. Introduce yourself. Would you mind standing so that everybody can see you? Good man.
Yes, hi. I'm Errol. I'm old enough to remember when the bomb went off, and I know I don't look it. And a bit like Wally, I was sort of kind of indifferent because it was politics. But you know, when I look back at it now and hearing you talk, it's amazing how easy our humanity can be hijacked. Because I was around people at the time who literally celebrated it. They were saying things like, "Oh, it's lucky that Maggie Thatcher went to use the toilet at the time, so apparently she was sitting on the toilet when the bomb went off and that's why she didn't die." And people were saying, "Oh, we'll get her next time." And and it's what you said, people actually died, and it wasn't just politicians. I've got a thing about certain types of music, and they just so blatantly talk about splashing someone's head and, and killing people and all the rest of it, and stabbing people just so casually, and it seems like music, media and loads of stuff all sort of encourage us to, allow our humanity to be hijacked. I'm not sure what my question is. I just wanted to say something like that. Yeah, thank you very much. It's very interesting.
Thank you.
Yes, sorry, Dave.
Hiya, Joe. My name's Dave. I'm a mediator. In terms of the peace process, I can't help but feel, how do you cope when you watch the news, when you see all this conflict going on and the lack of dialogue? Because, had the peace process started before the Brighton bombing, you may not have been where you are, and you wouldn't have lost your dad. And I think, how do you cope when you watch all this conflict going on, thinking, you just need to talk? How do you deal with that? Because you've suffered it and experienced it when it hadn't happened.
Yeah, I find it heartbreaking. Just the killing right now. For me, I know that any time we hear anyone has been killed, there's a family there. The pain, for me, it's just horrendous. So I haven't finished changing what I've been through something positive, and that will carry on till I die because of the state of the world. I feel a lot. So what I have learned is taking care of myself, and I did not know that in my 20s. But I know the young people know that far more than I did. The sense of sometimes turning off the media, not hearing stories, keeping myself safe. And I spend a lot of time in my woods, which I suppose is like my church really, because I just go in the woods and immediately I just feel this amazing peace and connection, because I have to take care of myself because I'm very open and I feel so much, and I have friends right now in Gaza, I have friends in Israel, and to me, killing is killing. I don't mind what nationality is, what the identity is. We're all human beings, and it's the same. I refuse to believe in sides. I really believe that an enemy is someone's story we haven't yet heard. We haven't connected with them. And I know people who take sides either on Palestine or Israel, and they're furious with each other. And I absolutely refuse. I love that expression, hijacking. I wouldn't let anyone hijack my humanity. And after the riots we had last year, I was furious. I had friends who were too scared to go home because they thought they were going to be attacked. And I was furious with the far right who'd done that. And I didn't want to see their humanity. I didn't want to hear their stories. And yet I know some people did straight away. That amazing mosque in Liverpool, incredible story there of someone coming out of the mosque and with the people who were attacking him and offering food. Those stories of humanity is absolutely extraordinary. So I will not let anyone take my humanity away. But sometimes I need to just switch off, watch some telly that's absolutely meaningless, reality TV, I don't know, I think it's fine every now and again, all my woods, to take care of myself and to know when I'm feeling too much pain, and I'm someone who cries a lot, I dance to music, I express my feelings, but then I've also got my peace heroes around the world who give me that hope when things are really difficult, and I do believe we can change it, but Patrick McGee said it the first time we ever spoke, we were given 2 minutes each, and he said, I now know I could have sat down and had a cup of tea with Joe's dad. Now the Conservative government didn't have a policy of cups of tea, they don't really understand cups of tea, but to me that, in mediation, that's like respect, it's about equity, it's about listening, it's respect, dignity, and yes, I can see the two men together, they could have sat down and had a cup of tea. So actually all that killing was a complete waste of time. So as humanity, when are we going to learn that violence doesn't actually solve anything? I think every time someone's blown up, killed, whatever, healing takes generations. So when are we going to learn to find another way to communicate our differences. I have a great hobby, which no one knows about it, but now you do. So when I hear like people on the world stage right now, all this talk that's going on, I change it to restorative conversation. So I imagine it's much more empathic and listening and go, are you having a difficult day? To Putin, like, what is it you really need? And trying to understand, the need behind the behaviour and trying to negotiate and, because we have the skills now. We could actually do our politics in a different way without hurting each other. But we're not there yet. That was a long answer, a bit random. Sorry, Jonathan.
Thank you.
Do you, just before I continue, do you think that can be done in schools?
It is being done in schools.
But can it be effective in schools?
And it is being done in schools and it is effective.
Mm.
Yeah.
Have you guys had experience of anything of that sort? That kind of engagement on that level? The kind of counselling, explorative, opening up?
Call that peer mediation.
Yeah.
So like you have someone like maybe my age mediating someone younger but still in the school, so like maybe year 8 or year 7, so they can have a different point of view on the conflict and see why like maybe fighting and like a whole big argument wasn't worth it. So like you have a different version of counselling because sometimes the students don't always connect well with the teachers. They can have more of a conversation and feel more comfortable talking to someone that's like around their age. So that's what we did.
Love it.
Dave, do you want to add to comment on peer mediation?
No, just say, this is a peer mediator here, which I'm immensely proud of. No, I just think you spoke about wanting to change the future. I think it's somewhere where we should, I'm talking about money, but invest that whole idea at a younger age. I never had the opportunity to train as a mediator, but young people do now, and I think it's a different way of thinking, and I think it does change the way you think, and I think it's very important that we try that now with a younger generation to help that future you spoke about.
Great, thank you.
Wally?
Joe, to go back to Northern Ireland, have you spoken to people from the loyalist side about have you? How has that been received?
Yeah. Very well, apart from when I had a riot. But apart from that, it's gone really well. Yeah. I've met people from all sides. I've met ex-combatants from all sides. I've met ex-British soldiers as well who were there. Everyone has a story, and they're all different stories. Everyone has brought their own meaning to what's happened to them, and I think I've been learning to listen to people who have completely different views without making someone right and someone wrong. Like all the truths are valid, all the stories are valid, and I've immersed myself in so many stories. And I've been to different parts of the world and heard, the stories in a few stories in like Rwanda and some of the people there who inflicted the violence. And what happens when I really hear these stories, wherever they are, whatever label they've given themselves or been given by society, I see a human being struggling to do the best they can given probably very difficult circumstances. And I think everyone deserves to be listened, every story deserves to be heard. And in Northern Ireland, there's still people who haven't shared their stories. So I go somewhere like Kosovo, which was like terrible conflict there, so much suffering. They don't have the resources we have in Northern Ireland for people to have their stories heard. It takes, the cost of repairing society after violence is massive, because trauma lives on in the body and can be passed on to the next generation. But yes, I've heard, and I'm actually off to Belfast Wednesday, I think. Yeah, and for a few days, and then I'm going to be going to Derry, and I still love meeting people and hearing their stories. And each time I hear a story, it kind of touches me and helps me also heal as well.
Yes, Sam, come in.
Hi, Joe. I'm Sam. I do have a question for you. The world we are now living in is far more polarized than decades ago. Would you make your peacemaking work much tougher?
I just think it is what it is, right? Yes, probably does make it harder, because people are so quick to take a side, aren't they? They're right, and one of the things I do is facilitate workshops for people to learn to have those difficult conversations, without making them right and someone wrong. You know, there can be, even in families, different views, opposing views. I do a lot of work, like with Americans right now, who is so divisive, but it's also true here as well, isn't it? So I think to help with those skills, once people know they can do it, and I think that really helps the confidence. You know, and basically I think a lot of people don't want to cause more harm, you know, and so they just need to be perhaps given the opportunity. But it was interesting because I've been thinking about how do people change, you know, and I think people change because they feel ready to, because they feel it inside themselves, not because someone tells them they have to change. So I think, how do we create opportunities for people to really feel listened to? And no one, I don't believe, can change until they feel validated in where they are. We have to really listen to people first. And then when people feel really heard, validated, acknowledged, then it opens up a space that perhaps they can then hear the other and perhaps change their sense of self-righteousness.
I mean,
but it does take time.
That's the whole principle of coaching, isn't it? That you're helping the person find the way forward for them. How would anybody else know? You can't get inside the head and change the electrodes, if that's a word. But you know what I mean.
Did you want to come back with something?
You also mentioned there's humanity in each person.
Yeah.
Can you explain a little bit about that? How did you see humanity in each person?
I guess that's our part of us that can connect with each other, our love, you know, that what makes us people who can love, who can see the connection with people who are different to us. Like it's I think we're all born with humanity, but sometimes when we have hard times, it's kind of taken away, and there can be a hardening. But inside the even each one of us, there is a soft humanity which just sort of knows we're all connected. You know, knows that your happiness is bound up in my happiness and your happiness, and there is a connection which we can't see, but I think we can feel it. But I think it's a hard thing to define humanity. We might all have our own sense of what that is. So. But it's what we have in common. I suppose that's what it is, and I think that is stronger than anything else, is what we have in common. It's beyond any label, beyond any behaviour.
Sen, you look very doubtful.
Yeah, no, I sometimes when I look at Putin, I do have questions that does he do have humanity? And some
that's a great
world
question.
leaders as well.
No, I think that too. That's a great question. Yeah. And the thing is, I would say the answer would be yes, but how would we experience it? Yeah.
Errol, you wanted to come in.
I just think that, like when you say that it's hard to define what the humanity is, you know what I mean? It's things like empathy and compassion, something that we all have, but sometimes we have to suspend it because it makes us weak or it's not. You know what I mean? If you are running a country and you feel the need that you need to go to war with them, then having empathy and compassion are not tools that you need at the time, you know. So I think, as I said, it can get hijacked depending on the circumstances, and maybe the world would be a better place, and I don't really like that phrase, but maybe the world would be a better place if we can remember that we have it regardless of the task at hand, you know what I mean, regardless of what we have to deal with.
Yeah, no, I love that, and I think systems that we're in can take it away. Systems we're living in, the systems don't help us to grow that, especially if it's tough.
It can be seen as a weakness to have humanity.
Yeah, to have empathy definitely can be seen as a weakness. So I would say that it's actually our strength, and I believe in unbounded empathy. So not just empathy for those that are the same as us, but those that are different as well. And what would the world look like then?
Well, that's what I think empathy is. Empathy is like a respectful understanding of others.
Yeah.
I mean, because I can easily have empathy for someone who's similar to me, who thinks like I do. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Right. Yes, Nick.
My name is Nick. Joe, thanks very much for your presentation and sharing with us. You mentioned other people in the world who've inspired you, and I just wonder, when times get tough, who are those people that come to mind?
Well, okay, so great question. So right now, Bassam Aramin and who's a Palestinian, and Rami Aliaman, his name. You can find them in the Forgiveness Project, or just do a Google search for Bassam and Rami. So Bassam lives in the West Bank, and he's a dear. They're both very, very good friends of mine. And he was part of something called Combatants for Peace. He himself went to prison for throwing stones as a young teenager, and then came out and devoted himself to Combatants for Peace, which is ex-combatants working for peace, Israelis and Palestinians. And then his 10-year-old daughter was killed. And he then decided to use his pain for peace. And the people who helped him were his new friends, Israeli friends and Combatants for Peace. And then he met Rami, whose daughter was killed by a Palestinian. And they have more love for each other than I've ever seen in any relationship. They're like brothers. And they do a lot of talks together. And they're very funny as well. They really make people laugh. The way they speak to each other. And they are so inspirational, like the two of them. And quite often people think that empathy perhaps could be like just for girls. I go into schools, but then I get to a point of showing a picture of these two men with their arms around each other, and I go, well, why do you think their arms around each other? And I tell the story. And I think, especially for Bassam, he got a scholarship to come here with his family quite a few years ago to study at Peace Studies in Bradford, and for his dissertation he studied the Jewish story in the war. He studied the Holocaust. And he then went back to Palestine and told his Palestinian friends the Jewish story. That is incredible empathy, because his daughter was taken away by Israelis. I mean, he's like an empathy just champion of them all, and he really helps me. He pops up on Facebook sometimes on messengers going, "Hi Joe, how are you?" And I think he's in the West Bank. He's probably like can't leave the house right now. There's fighting around the road, and yet he's thinking about me. He's just extraordinary. And Rami. So the Parent Circle Family Forum, if any of you ever feel you want to give an example of Palestinians, Israelis who say you do not help us by taking sides. Your pain is my pain is your pain. We have shared humanity. Then look up Parent Circle Family Forum, and there's many of them there. And that's also a way for people who get very stuck in thinking some pain is more important, or just to, it gives a sense of like faith and trust that there are people who right now in the midst of conflict are saying, I'm not going to let my humanity be taken away.
I was thinking about your work and how there are two very, very distinct spheres of operation. One is on the ground, say in a school in Tower Hamlets.
Yeah.
And who knows, maybe you'll come into Peckham or Southwark in the future.
Yeah.
But equally, you're part of an organisation, or you set up an International People's Summit, which was looking to create departments of peace in governments in Europe. So vast ideas, full of grand words and huge ambition. The chances of success for those are probably inverse to their scale of thinking. Which do you think, can you differentiate those two spheres that are such a long way apart, where you come, say in a room like this, you're working almost one-to-one with us as we engage with aspects of what you have experienced and the wisdom, call it, that you bring. And if you sit round a table with like-minded campaigners and activists on the international scale, it's degrees and degrees harder because you're not in contact with what people sometimes call real people. How do you differentiate those two, and where do you like to be?
I don't really. I think I'm very grassroots. Like for me, this is what I love to do, meeting people and to go deeper and do the workshops. I'm very much, I'm grassroots. Like in terms of my impact, I have no idea. I don't measure it. I'm just like every day. Okay, I go back to the 27-year-old me and go, okay, I'm going to create something positive today. My dad would have been 100 last week, which is like an incredible age. And I went to a school near where I live in Salisbury, and that met some young people there. That was like the best way of me to honour my father, was to do that. And so opportunities, if they come, I'll take them. But I have a charity, but it's just me and a few amazing trustees. So I don't see that I'm, got massive capacity to change the world. For me, it's about one person, and I'm learning just as much as I'm, speaking, because I'm still on my journey. And I think it's very much together, what are we going to do? And when I go into schools, I do see the young people as change makers. That's how I see them. And I believe that for us to create the world perhaps we all want, it requires everyone to be a change maker. And that can be as much as just, smiling at someone going down the road, or, writing a card to someone. It doesn't have to be huge.
Exactly.
Change is change. I think that's what I mean.
Yeah. Doreen, you've been very quiet at the back.
Listening. I like to listen, reflect. I thought about what you were saying about humanity and, different experiences has such a vast effect on people's humanity, how they feel, how they behave. And I know, and that determines a lot of behaviour. And so when you were talking about empathy, and a lot of people don't know how to empathise because of their experiences and because of their upbringing. And then thinking about these young people, I call them my babies, as change makers, and that's exactly what they are. I mean, when Samuel spoke, well done. It's just, and Davina as well, it's just not giving them that opportunity, because you can't bring about change without getting the opportunity, the support, the direction, from the people like us who are experienced, who's been there and done it to guide them. And so there's a lot to do, but there's also a lot that's been done. And just listening to you, I'm just so inspired. I'm sorry I was late and I missed a lot of it, but it's just great to sit and listen to you, and then listen to the feedback as well. So thank you for that.
My name's Emmanuel, and I'm also at Elevate Minds. You mentioned earlier that as you get older, you know less about yourself. But I wanted to know if you ever thought that you could regain your spirituality back.
Great question. So I know myself more now. I know who I am, and I know my emotional makeup. I know that really, really well now. I think I just know less the answers to the big questions, like who's in charge of the universe, like what happens when we die, like those big questions. But what I do feel very strong is the spirituality, in that we all have that humanity. That is my spirituality, and that's very, very strong. And nothing will take that away. And I work hard to make sure I don't lose that. And so, yes, I think my spirituality is there, that's come back in a much more grounded way, a much more real way than it used to be. And so the changes are ones that, I think has enabled me to connect far more with people than I would have as a young person, where I felt a little bit kind of detached from everything. Now I don't. And I don't, I'm not when people say to me, well, I know this is going to happen when I die, or I know, this person's in charge and that's how we do this, and I'll just be curious. I think curiosity is great. And if I was really fixed in what I believe, I wouldn't be so curious. So I'm just really open, and I'm sort of quite fluid, but also I really believe no one's going to take that away from me, that we are all connected, and that is stronger than anything else. And dehumanisation that happens, is not okay. I will fight that. I will fight that in a non-violent way. I will speak up for people who don't have a voice. I feel very strongly about that. I do have a spiritual belief. Is that why you asked it?
Yeah. I'm Christian.
Correct.
And I feel like once we die, then we'll all go to heaven.
Yeah.
No matter what sins we've done, because God loves us and wants us to be with Him when we die.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you believe in reincarnation?
No.
That's not what
No.
So it doesn't matter what sins? Okay. At the back, Ben, did you want to make a comment?
Hi, I'm Ben, here with my partner Hannah. I represent, we've got a community interest company. I was a previous guest on Chris's podcast, life coach, and do a lot of reform work in the prisons. My question is, the role that your father was undertaking for his organisation took him to Brighton on that day. Mr McGee's role that he was undertaking for his organisation took him to Brighton on the day for different reasons. And there's a lot of synergy, I feel, with some of the violence that we see on the streets of today with young people undertaking roles for organisations that they represent. And the thing that often comes up is people's true purpose. Is their purpose and their focus in their life unique to them or the organisation that they represent? Because quite often, the people that we work with in the world of reform, they'll commit acts or violence or whatever the case may be, almost on autopilot. And when they have time to themselves to reflect and look within, they find their true purpose and they make that conscious decision that if this was me in the now, then I wouldn't have done those things. So is there an element of not only supporting the people in the schools with the work that you do, and as we also do, but is there also an element of needing to support the parents and the authoritative figures to empower that within the younger generations?
Yes.
Just what do you thought?
Yeah, no, definitely, you're right. That's absolutely brilliant. You know, like I think we let young people down. You know, any time they take a knife and use it, we're letting them down. As the older generation, as the parents, there's no blame. But as a society, you know, the reasons why that happens. You know, we need to work on every level. You know, this story comes to mind. I'm never going to forget. I did a restorative justice case in a prison near where I live. It was in Wiltshire, with a young man from Hackney. And when he was just coming up to 16, he'd killed someone with a knife. And I went to see him. We've always worked in pairs a few times, and I was absolutely amazed at his emotional intelligence and what he'd learned about himself. And he was on his own journey, and he really wanted to meet the mother of the young man he killed. So we went to try and meet the mother, and she was we found her in Jamaica, and she was like, I'm coming tomorrow to the prison, I want to meet him. We're like, okay, we need to see you first, you know, it's going to take a bit of time. And like 3 months later, we brought the two of them together, you know, and as soon as she walked in the prison, she gave him a hug, and said she forgave him as long as he had a good life, but she forgave him, you know. But what I heard from it was that they then started talking about the funerals they'd both been to, the same funerals in Hackney. So before he was 13, he himself had been knifed, but he'd been to so many funerals, they spent half an hour talking about all the shared funerals. And I was like, where's the responsibility for that? You know, like the chances are, you know, if any of us had been him, we might have gone his own direction. You know, like the judgment falls away. Well, I wasn't there anyway, but like there's that sense of the bigger questions. We are failing young people if that's their experience, you know, in many, many ways, you know.
How do you answer your own question about the responsibility?
Well, I think it's shared responsibility. I actually think it's shared responsibility for any kind of killing. It's part of what we're creating as a community. You know, we put it on the one person, you know, but it's bigger than that. But it's not about blaming people, but just that accountability, and things can be changed. And I think if we, it gives us clues to interventions, doesn't it? You know, because no one aged 6 or 7 want to grow up and kill. You know, that's not what happens. So what happens in those years, and what could we have done? You know, and that's where the work that you do and all of you are doing is so important, is those interventions. Because it's so much easier to support people before they take that step and kill. Afterwards, it's, you know, this young man is going to be in prison for a lot longer. You know, he was so amazing at doing the restorative justice. They made him like the RJ champion for the prison, so he started supporting other people who were doing the same work. You know, incredible. And I just felt like crying sometimes. I just thought, what his life could have been.
What? I just want to finish that. What made him change?
He did some. His prison had a few courses, but I think he was always someone who thought deeply, you know, and when he had time to think, and he read books, you know, he you're an amazing man.
Dave,
I'm going to paint you a scenario, Joe. You've been invited to the United Nations.
They wouldn't invite me.
Well, I think they've heard about you, and they want you to do a side workship. So
Okay.
you get in the lift, and as you go up 2 floors, the Russian delegation walk into that lift.
Wow.
You've got 3 floors. What
Right.
would you say to the Russian delegation? And when they get out, it goes up a couple of floors, and the Ukrainian delegation get in, and you've got 2 floors. What would you say to each side in those seconds that you've got with them about what's going on at the moment?
Well, you know the way I do. It's all about preparation. You're giving me like 2 floors.
I know, I'm putting you under pressure. You've got I've got seconds with him.
Yeah.
What
Well, I
can
mean, I
say?
would want to connect with the Russian people. You know, how's life with you? Like, what's important to you? Like, what's the hardest thing living where you live? What are your dreams? What are your fears for young people? Like, make that connection. Like, now, a lot of people like to keep the mask on, don't they? They don't want to open up. They don't feel safe to open up. And I'm not sure a lift is a prepared environment for these kind of connections. But I hear what you're saying, you know. And then when the Ukrainians come in, you know, like, I mean, I would love us. I mean, there is dialogue happening. There's always dialogue. There was dialogue between the IRA way before the peace process. Like, we were told, no, we don't speak to terrorists. Well, they were. Like, they always are.
Yeah.
So that dialogue has to happen. Because what happens when people get into, I'm so right that I know I can kill you, that belief in myself. It's like playing God, isn't it? I'm so right in what I believe in. It gives me the right to take a life, right? You know, and politicians do that. Now, they can only do that by taking away the humanity. They can only do that by seeing them as less than us. Otherwise, your heart couldn't cope with the pain. You have to shut down your heart, shut down your ability to care, that compassion. You know, so how do you get that back?
Well, can I just say I've got complete faith in you, and I reckon you could do it in 2 floors. My money's on you, Joe.
Well,
I think they'll find it difficult coming up against you.
If you've got a direct line to the United Nations, let me know. But, you know, I don't get asked to do that kind of work. But, you know, I would. Of course I would go. Thank you for the question. Never been asked that, you can be sure.
In the back row, I think we've got Doreen wants to make a comment.
Yes, sorry Joe, I didn't introduce myself earlier, and I'm Doreen, CEO of Elevated Minds. Yeah, which is where these young people are from. And it's working with young people who are gifted and talented and closing that gap between performance and potential, or potential and performance, whichever way they look at it, but also working with vulnerable young people who are on the verge of exclusion from school. Yeah. And when you were talking about parents, it sort of conjured up, hit a nerve and thought, you know, we work with a lot of parents and we've done so for years, and it's very much a 360 approach, and it's a lot of parents is very much disempowered by the system, by the government, by whoever's in power. And so parents don't know how to discipline children because that power was taken away from them. They are in a world, in a community where they're scared to even open their mouths to their children. And so I've been to 6 funerals, and young people from the schools that I used to work at, as in education, used to come along with me. Their parents didn't, but their parents sent them with me. And you're right, the way it affects the young person, every time they go to the funeral of somebody they know, and this is where they start harming themselves, because at the end of the day, it's either go down a road where they're inflicting harm on themselves or they arm themselves with a weapon. It's one or the other, and so it's a vicious circle. And it's important that parents are involved in everything we do, but it's giving those parents the opportunity to parent and parent the way they want to parent, with the support. And I'm not saying parent in a negative way, what I'm saying is use their voices. Parents don't have an opportunity to do that at all, and if they do, they're just scared of what they may say, may offend, may cause problems for their children, and so they take a back seat and allow their child to do whatever the child wants to do. So, you know, you are right, we all have to work together, but it does start in the home, and if they don't know, then they need the support, the guidance, and the encouragement to work with whoever, whatever organisations are out there who can support them to get their child to where they want to be and where they can be. So yes, very much so. The work you're doing is incredible. Thank you. So I feel very honoured to have met some of you young people and you. So amazing, but you're right. Yeah.
Right, Hannah in the back row.
Sorry, hello, Hannah from here. Really a bit of a conversation rather than a question, but I suppose observing what people have said today, and it's really interesting what's happened as a result of your intervention here today. It's brought up more conversation around things like empathy, and as we know, I mean, you guys learning psychology and stuff, kind of you're learning about empathy and how it's learned, and kind of 21 it starts really kicking in, doesn't it? And things like dehumanising. So where we've spoken about, you hit something when you'd said about they weren't just politicians, there were other people there, and where you'd spoke about kind of far right people, and where we've spoken about kind of wars and soldiers and civilians and non-civilians, and really everyone's human, right? So and again when we talk about kind of things on the street as well, and people are humans, and that kind of comes back to your point that we've started speaking about a horrible tragic event, what you've gone through, and then it kind of filters through to kind of day-to-day life. So yeah, just want to say thank you so much for opening the floor to these conversations. And yeah, I think there's a lot of work to do. I mean, we did an event, didn't we? And I think it kind of brought together all decision makers through reform, but education as well. And I think the underlying theme of it was early intervention, because like you say, no 6 or 7 year old decides they want to start going and killing everyone. So it's kind of what we're doing early on to then, before it gets to that point where people are kind of starting to hurt each other and stuff. So yeah, no, but thank you so much, that's really helpful.
That's amazing, thank you for sharing.
Errol, did you want to come in?
Yeah, sorry, I know this is the third time I've spoken. There's a couple of things there. You know, like I want to answer everybody, so I'm really holding it down. So I want some credit for that. This brother over here, what's your name, mate? Emmanuel. Yeah. So I felt that was a very sort of warm and sort of brave question to ask when you asked Joe, you know what I mean, is there a chance of getting your spirituality back? And I was quite struck by your answer when you said, well, we don't know, do we? We don't know if there's a God. We don't know what's going to happen to us after we die.
I just said I don't know.
Okay, yeah, so you don't. And I would argue that we don't know. It's not a thing that can be knowing, and knowledge seems to be sort of ascertained by science. And you can't use science to judge spirituality. So this is why the word faith comes in, you know what I mean? So faith takes place of knowing, you know what I mean? So, because we talk about faith as if it's a thing, but faith is something that you kind of apply. If I said to you, I've seen God, and I'm a Christian, if I said I've seen God, I want you to sort of get me committed, you know what I mean? If I heard a voice or anything, you know what I mean? It's where faith comes in. So I really like what you said, you know what I mean? It's a faith thing. The other thing is, and please come back at me, there's this thing that I've come up with, stealth parenting. Stealth parenting, you know what I mean? If your child is getting 14 and looks like a 25-year-old and you can't box them anymore and you can't threaten them to behave themselves, I think it's coming back and doing it in a stealth way, you know what I mean? When they walk away, look at their phone, search their room, talk to their younger brothers and sisters, because they'd be sworn to secrecy. I'm telling you, your 7-year-old little sibling has been sworn to secrecy, and they know more what's going on with the 14 and 15-year-old than anyone else. You know, you don't say to your 15-year-old daughter, well, yes, I looked in your diary and I know you're having sex in that. You look in their diary and don't tell them, but then at least if you know, then you can take some steps to kind of make him safe, you know what I mean? If you think he's running about with a gang, search him. This is what I would do, yeah? Search my 14-year-old when he's leaving the house, when he's coming in. I'd watch him, I'd talk to his friend, find out if he's stashing knives around the area and all the rest of it, you know what I mean? Stealth, you've got to do it in a stealth way. I mean, I'm going to write a book on it, stealth parenting.
It's also
and I come up with it.
It's also having those connections with your children, though, and being able to talk to your child, and so.
Yeah, but they lie.
Yes, they do. But if your child trusts you, you trust your child, and you make sure you're open with your child. So my children speak to me all the time. My grandchildren speak to me all the time about girlfriends and about everything, because that's the way I brought them up. I want them to be like that. So they know about me what I want them to know about me, because I'm grown, and so I've been there and done it. But they're walking in my footsteps, you know what I mean? Yeah. So it's giving them the opportunity to say, you know, Mom or Nan, that I'm in trouble or I need, and, you know, or if a child feels they can't go to the parents, then There's got to be an adult in their life who they trust, and this is when it comes to school sometimes or organisation. But it's having an adult in their life that knows they're there for them. They've got their back no matter what. I trust you. You trust me. Let's work together to yes.
I love that.
Yeah.
Right. We're coming towards the end of our time. I want to spend 5 minutes thinking about how we're the village, because it takes a village, doesn't it, to raise a child. So, what are we going to do? How far can we all go to help that 6 or 7 year old who hasn't yet had any ideas of a darker instinct?
Send him to church.
Send him to church, Errol?
I
Okay.
can't agree with Errol. I was sent to church.
What?
I was sent to church at that age. I grew up so confused.
So was I, and I came back round to it.
Yeah,
so
but-
I was sent to church as a
But
kid.
you came round to
and
it.
then I went totally
Yeah.
the other way, you know what I mean, anti-church. And then as I get older, I started to think, if it's true, I'm in trouble.
Right, I'm going to go to the other side of the room. Nathan.
Yeah, I'm a little bit in mind. And to answer your question, I'd say that I'd make the 6 or 7 year old aware about some of the problems that we face, because like when you learn like certain problems from your friends, like it can kind of mislead you and take you down the wrong path. So I feel like if a trusted adult or like a parent makes children aware about like the problems and like the wrongs and rights, then I guess we wouldn't have this problem as much. So yeah.
Has that happened for you? Have you personal experience of that?
Yeah, my parents have been good at like telling me what's right from wrong and whatnot.
It's been
Excellent.
Yeah.
Althea, I think you want to make a contribution.
Yeah, my name is Althea Smith. I'm the chairperson for the Dean Community Centre, and I'm very active in the community. And what I would say from listening to everyone, it's about not just the village bringing up the child or the parents give birth, but at the end of the day, the village takes over. And we're trying to have that village mentality, especially around Peckham, from different sort of groups. But to make it more effectively and more powerful, we need to unite and work together. Because unity is strength. And I find on this estate alone, we have lots of antisocial behaviour. So we've got a problem, we need a solution. So our solution for Acorn is to have, I've got 7-year-old or carry a knife or making mockery of the police. So I will decide to have a movie night. So the movie night, they'll come, they'll choose a film from YouTube, they'll watch the film and they'll have a discussion. And then the parents will come in and say, what did they discuss tonight? Because we're trying to say to the parents they need to be involved, more involved in their children's life. But they are afraid of the system. Because the system is not only broken, but it's broken the parents themselves. So they become afraid because they say, if I do something, if I slap my child, I can get 6 months in prison. I can do that. So the fear factor is there, which we need to remember that when we were in Africa, when we were in the Caribbean, that big tree out the road there, at the corner there, you sit under that tree and we plan the strategy for the village. That's what we need to get back to. That's reality. And it's happening not just in the UK, it's happening across the globe. And what legacy are we going to leave? Because there's a lot of sadness. My friend was killed 40 years ago in Lucian. He was stabbed in the jugular. Now, he was like my brother, and that's how I start to get involved in doing all these things I do for the community. So I would say to a young person, and we've done it, I can't afford to give you a trainer for £150. I can give you a trainer for £20 to £30. It might not be spectacular what you want, but also get you back into university. We've got people back into Cambridge that won scholarship for Cambridge and so forth from this community because of exclusion from school. And then they've become, and they've gone podcasters, they become entrepreneur. I've got a couple of them I'm mentoring as well. I've got a 23-year-old right now. He lives on this block. He was arrested by the police because he had a knife. But that knife was a part of his tool because he's an electrician. So now, he comes here once a month and he gets 35 young people. I say young people because women are included. And he lectures them about trying to be an entrepreneur, set your own business up. And that's a change from saying, oh, the police is going to stop me today, they're going to search me for something. He's trying to change their life and then look at it. You look at the negative, let's turn it into a positive.
Wow. Thank you.
Amazing.
Rakiba, would you like to make any comment before I hand back to Joe for some final thoughts?
I'd probably say, what do you think is the solution for peace? Like, do you think that in order for us to have peace in our lives, that we need to be empathetic and we need to be able to forgive people?
Great question. I think that we can do so much in schools, and we can teach 5, 6, 7-year-olds about how to manage their anger, how to be with their pain, have circles of listening time every day so they know they matter. Ways for them to develop. Emotional intelligence is called soft skills, but I think that it's really hard. The communication skills, we can teach that really, really early. We teach that when one child is behaving as a bully, we can then work out ways so that they can actually meet those needs in a different way. We know all that now, and that can start really early on. So I think we can change how we bring up and raise our young people. But then for me the hard one is like people who make decisions over us, how to change them. And I actually don't have the answer. I believe change happens when enough people have the same vision and commitment and dedication. So eventually the work that we're all doing will infiltrate into those that can make decisions, into our politics. My dream is a world where people around the world, the people who have all that responsibility and power, come together and say, we're actually going to stop using violence. We're going to stop hating. We're going to stop dehumanising. We're going to care as much for that child over there as my child. How do we get there? I really don't know, but I believe that maybe the more people that think like we do, the work that you're doing, the work you'll do when you're older, and everyone here, it will eventually get so strong that it will infiltrate those that make decisions. And then we've got to change our institutions, because I do believe, I don't know if any of you have been in the House of Commons, but the room that they make decisions in, it's not a circle, it's confrontational. You can't have like a nuanced discussion about it. It's like, I'm right, you're right, I'm right, and they're just like on top of each other. So we need to change how we do our politics. We need to change our prisons. We need to change all of it. But I think together there is a power in that. But I have my bit of the jigsaw, which I'm dedicated to. You have your bit of the jigsaw, which you're dedicated to. And eventually this will create more change. How and how long it's going to take, I don't know, but I think it's worth it. It's worth us all trying, despite the fact that quite often we're not aligned with other people around us, and there's so much brokenness around in the system. But we are stronger together, so I believe that there is a way.
Very briefly then.
There's been a lot of dialogue around if we've got those 6 or 7-year-olds, and how do we do this. I think you're a testament to exactly what we do. You share your lived experience, no matter what it is. Errol touched on media earlier to do with music and lyrics and stuff like that. We're fighting a battle against the media machines that are pushing this narrative out there and focusing, like Chris said earlier on sometimes the negative aspects.
Yeah.
But to counterbalance that, I think it's important that people leverage their lived experience, which is kind of what a lot of my work is. But I think we're all doing exactly what we should be doing.
Right.
We're invested in this. I just want to say thank you for sharing yours.
I love that. We're all change makers in our own way, based on what we've been through. We're all turning around, something's happened to us. Yeah, and that's powerful. Thank you.
And something else that's powerful I'm going to leave you with is a couple of things that Jo has said from one of the websites I've been researching around. And she says it's possible to forgive people and still make them wrong, if you understand what I mean by that. But crucially, she also says, the only person I can actually forgive is myself. So if we're all change makers, perhaps we can still rev a bit more fully, with more intrinsic power, latent power, that can be found and harnessed. I think it involves courage to speak, courage to walk up and inquire and then join in with whatever it is you find. And Jo, we have found a courageous lady, and your coming to see us means a lot. And thank you for accepting our invitation and for morning.
I feel connected to Peckham now in a way I didn't before, because now I've met you and heard some amazing work, and it's just wonderful to feel like, you know, the village of Peckham, that I'm part of that, my heart is kind of part of that. So thank you for opening up to me and being here today. Lovely.
So thank you all so much for coming. Oh, really good.
Yeah, you can run around. Yeah. Sorry, I had something.